Back with another episode, swagged up at the Math Shack with Mr. Shack. I want to continue more with our y equals Mx+B and how we tackle some word problems, algebraic word problems. Although in your book and on the internet, these problems will be categorized as expressions and equations. We're just gonna call it algebra. And as my good friend Mr. Adair said, not pre-algebra. We're not gonna call it algebra 1. It's just algebra. And the way this is set up, you can start learning this in 6th and 7th grade, and hopefully get you a nice scholarship to college. So as I said in my previous episodes, when you look up these standards, these are the standards that we're gonna cover. When you look up these standards, you're going to see that it says expressions and equations. And it's going to talk about solving real life problems, word problems, using equations in the form of px plus q equals r. But because when you get to high school, they're going to be talking y equals mx+b. So the variables don't matter. So let's use the variables that you're going to end up using in high school anyway. Vertical learning. On top of that, it's even more challenging for you guys because, like I said before, and me and one of my colleagues, we talked about this morning. They say real life problems, but for a student who's 13 years old, these situations where somebody's going to the bowling alley spending money, that's not real life for our students. But these are the problems that they face. So we can sit here and complain about cultural bias and all that other stuff, or we can rise to the challenge, which I know we can do. So let's just do that. So jumping right in. Manny goes bowling. He has $50 to spend, and he spends $8.50 to rent the shoes. He then spends $5 for each game he bowls. Create an inequality, not an equation, an inequality to represent this situation. Now, this standard here, 7EEB4B, refers to inequalities. It can go with expressions and equations because the rules for inequalities are the same for expressions and equations, except when you're dealing with a negative coefficient. Middle schoolers, 7th graders specifically, don't really deal with negative coefficients in this case. So for the most part, if you can select the right inequality sign, that's as far as it goes as far as any difference from equations. So for inequalities, it's 4 different options. That's what makes it a little bit more challenging than equations. We have to choose one of these, right? And right off the bat, we'll jump right in. This type of inequality, because he has $50 and he can literally spend all of his money, it's gonna either be greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, because he can spend all of his money. If he wants to be broke, he can be broke. He can just spend all of his money. That's what he wants to do. So moving over here, let's talk more about this y equals mx+b thing and how we're going to use it to solve this word problem. So like I said before, these variables take on math terms, and then they also have real life terms. M is the slope, which is also a rate. X is the unknown most of the time. B is my y-intercept. And these are all the mathematical definitions or the mathematical representation of these variables. And y is the total. Now, y is always the total amount of money, total apples, always the total. It's a nasty E. Slope. Mathematical term, slope means rise over run. But most middle schoolers, 8th graders are graphing, 7th graders aren't. 7th graders, don't be too caught up on the word slope. 8th graders, you should know what it means. You should be working with the formula. You should be able to look at a graph and tell me how many units it goes up and how many units it goes across. Whether it goes up or down, determine whether the number is negative or positive. But in real life, slope can be identified in a word problem by looking for keywords. Keywords like each, per, because a slope is a rate. $10 each shirt, $10 per shirt. And remember, always remember, per means one. $10 a shirt. Every, monthly, weekly, and it goes on and on. But they are words that describe the same amount happening over the same amount of time. And they could be different amounts of time, but it's the same amount over the course of that same time. Unknown. X is simply always how many times M occurs. And we can find M when we find these keywords. In real life, B, for all my 8th graders, you know the y-intercept is where a line crosses the y-axis. But in real life, this could be your cable activation fee. Which is a starting fee. In real life, y-intercepts are starting fees, initial amounts, anything you start off with, down payments, but 13-year-olds aren't putting down payments on anything, but we'll get over that. Any one-time fee. So it could be the fact that they want you to create an equation, you bought 4 bracelets and 3 chains. We know the bracelets cost $3 a piece, but we don't know how much the chains cost. The bracelets becomes the one-time fee because we can make that calculation. We'll do a problem like that later on. Let's focus on this inequality. So let's begin to build this, and we won't put in an equal sign because this is an inequality, but same rules still apply. So now we have $50 he has to spend. That's his total. That's the total amount of money he has. I won't put a sign there. Each per. What is the slope? What is the rate? Well, he spends $8.50 to rent shoes. He spends $5 for each game. So the number of games has to be multiplied. By the amount of the games, which is $5. He spends $8.50 to rent shoes. How many times does he have to rent shoes? If he's just going to bowl for one day, he only has 2 feet. He rents shoes one time. That's my one-time fee. $8.50. Now, I'm almost done. If they wanted me to build an equation, I would put that and I'd be done. But they said inequality. So, this represents, and X goes here. Sorry about that. X will always be how many times M occurs, and it will always be the unknown. It's always going to be what the question is asking for. This question asks, how many games can he bowl? So X represents the number of games. 50 represents the total amount of money. This represents how much money being spent. The money. Now he can't spend more than $50, but he can spend $50.